The Super Smash Bros. Series does at least reasonable justice to a lot of its characters' home games, but there can always be more. Today, I'm going to be combing through every single character on the roster and giving them a new move that appears in their home series, but isn't in Smash yet. And I'm not going to be doing it alone either. Look out for a number of guest appearances from some fantastic creators I'm excited to be working with all throughout the video. Let's get into it! Let's go over some of the principles I'm going to be using here. I'm adding a single move per character, which means I'm generally also only going to be replacing a single move, although I am allowed to shift some things around to smooth things over. You'll see what I mean. This actually requires a pretty different approach compared to doing a more extensive character rework. A lot of people weren't super happy with Joker, for example, only using a single persona considering the Pokemon-esque collection system he uses in his home series. With only one move to work with though, at most you can really have him using two personas, and I think, say, having Jack Frost pop up just for his side special would actually make the design direction of Joker feel a bit more muddled. As far as source material to work with, anything from the past or present is fair, including games released after Ultimate, but I'm not pulling from unreleased games at the time of this video's launch, so Ryu wouldn't get anything from the recently previewed Street Fighter 6. As far as how these moves would affect character balance, I'm not 100% ignoring that, but I'm also not worrying about it too much, especially in terms of moves which would make characters way stronger. Final smashes are not something I'm looking at in this video, and if a proposed move already exists as an item, I'm fine with that. Ditch the item if needed. And finally, my personal preference would be for characters in Smash to nicely represent the entirety of their home series, whereas official Smash designs often heavily base them around one or two games, although sometimes of course that does work very well. All of these points are just how I'm approaching the project, mind you. For the guests, I just gave them the prompt and said, "Let's go!" Mario's a bit of an acid test right off the bat because he has such a diverse history to pull from and such a huge range of abilities, but at the same time, in Smash seems much better kept as a very simple beginner-friendly character. I could go with some kind of possession mechanic with Cappy from Super Mario Odyssey, I could go with any number of power-ups he's been able to collect, and a lot of those would be cool, but at the end of the day, Mario not having a hammer in his moveset just feels wrong, even if there are already a few hammer moves among the roster. I'd make a hammer swing his new forward smash, and add in a couple of bonus mechanics where it can block all projectiles, and has a damage boost and shield breaking potential if you release it at just the right moment after charging it for a little bit, accompanied with a visual spark or something of that nature. This is admittedly a bit of an outlier because it's not quite how most forward smashes work, and you can argue that Mario should teach you the fundamentals, but at the same time, he's already got moves that break away from Smash fundamentals a bit, and it would help differentiate it from the hammers that already exist on other characters. Donkey Kong gets a barrel from his original appearance, replacing his headbutt in the side special slot. This would be a slow-moving projectile that rolls along the ground, blocks other projectiles, and takes moderate melee damage to break, shoring up some of his weaknesses and finally giving him a tool that he's always been heavily associated with. For Link, I'd like to see Rivali's Gale in the up special slot, replacing the spin attack. A lot of people were expecting this change before Ultimate was announced, and while there are other recovery changes you could also opt for, this one makes sense to me. Honestly though, a big part of the incentive here would just be freeing up the spin attack to go in the down smash slot instead, which isn't much of anything right now. This would just be a single spin, more like how it actually appears in the Zelda series with Adult Link, and you could even have it get bigger and release different magical energy as it charges. ESAM, you're the best Pikachu player in the world, but I know you're also named after Samus. Would you like to cover one of either Pikachu or Samus for my video? That was the question I asked. His response? Here he is for Samus, and we'll be hearing from him again in a bit for Pikachu as well.
Honestly, there's one thing that I wish existed which wouldn't even be viewable in competitive Smash, but, you know, in Super Metroid, and like I think Metroid Dread has it as well, you have your super speed, where you can just, if you keep running, you just run faster and faster, and then end up getting really fast, and you can like break through walls and stuff. I wish that existed for casual stages, even just to get her to be really fast, even if it didn't break blocks, although that would be very good versus Steve, but it would be nice. But in terms of something you could actually see on a character, I just wish that they added something ice to any of Samus's aesthetics. Again, she has Plasma Beam with her forward air and her forward smash. You know, Spazer and a bunch of the other beams would kind of be hard. I don't think I really want Phazon because that would just be strange, although Dark Samus kind of has Phazon-esque looks, but I really wish something incorporated ice, even if it was just like her forward smash became ice encapsulated in her cannon, or if you could just like charge something and then actually have it be ice instead of, you know, a charge shot and just like shoot it on the floor and then suddenly like an icicle pops up or something like that. There are so many options that are really that could be really cool that aren't necessarily broken, like auto-aiming missiles and stuff like that, which exists in the game. Something with a different beam other than forward air and forward smash, basically. Or just even being able to do like lemons, kind of like Mega Man, but just like little charge shots, because most of her shots are little and then suddenly she charges charge shot. But again, I do love the route that she has. I mean, hell, I love this character. I got a Metroid tattooed on me, so let's go.
Thanks, ESAM. If you'd like to see more of any of the guests that I featured today, all their info is going to be linked below. Also, just a heads up for everyone that the last time I did multiple character guest thoughts in a video like this, I got a ton of requests to add my own segments as well, and this time I have a second channel, MockRock Talk, so I've actually done that over there. I recorded for every character before anyone sent their parts in, and surprisingly, none of us had the same idea. So if you make it through here and still want more of the concept, that'll be linked below as well. Staying on the Metroid train a bit longer, Dark Samus ditches the Screw Attack Up special in favor of a Rise into the Air like it does in the Prime titles. The Rise itself wouldn't have an active hitbox, but its horizontal momentum could be significantly controlled. It could also be cancelled at any point with the shield button to perform an air dodge as usual, special, which would fire a burst of phase-on shrapnel diagonally downwards, or attack, which would slam Dark Samus into the ground with a burst of phase-on energy. Yoshi's standalone appearances are often accompanied by babies and bubbles, and almost always by some kind of transformation ability. I'd replace his up special, Egg Throw, with a bubble that Yoshi throws into the air, before transforming into a helicopter and quickly dashing into it. If an opponent was caught by the bubble, they'd be stuck in place for a free hit, which would be quite strong and wouldn't put Yoshi into freefall. Egg Throw just makes too much sense to keep on his kit though, so it could instead be moved to neutral special, and Egg Lay could go to side special. Now, this would take away Yoshi's egg roll. Yeah, you know what, I think he'll probably live, but I guess we can put it on dash attack duties instead, which at the moment is a pretty generic kick. Taking over next, I've got Vernius, someone I knew I'd have to bring on someday as an elusive content creator for both Smash and Kirby. Is he a Kirby tuber? Is Kirby tuber a thing people say? Regardless, he plays Kirby in Smash, Kirby in 2D, Kirby in 3D, just a real big ol' fan of Kirby. What better time?
If I were to change one move in Kirby's kit, it'd definitely be his up special. I love Cutter as much as the next guy, but Kirby's up B hasn't changed at all since Smash 64. And it's getting both boring and way too predictable when recovering with it. So instead, why don't we replace it with Kirby's wing copy ability? How I think it should work for Smash is to have Kirby be able to use the wing ability to get 5 extra jumps that give him much better airspeed and jump height. Just like in his actual games, using wing will have hitboxes covering his, well, wings whenever he jumps with them. Meaning he'd still be vulnerable from above even with the hitboxes covering his sides. Like just flap, like... visual representation, you know? Take notes, guys. After using all of his wing jumps, the ability will simply be unequipped, like Kirby getting hit with a copy ability hat on, and then will be able to act freely. This new up B could give Kirby the airspeed and the recovery mix-up he desperately needs. And I'm already getting excited just thinking about all the different combos it could start. I'm sure most of you all aren't really all that thrilled about Kirby being even harder to hit, but trust me, he needs it. Alright, thanks so much for having me on, MockRock. Hopefully that was good. I can't wait to see this video. So yeah.
Even though Fox's moveset is mostly made up, a lot of his kit has become something of a sacred cow in the Smash series at this point. I'd make a fairly simple change and replace his forward smash with a 2-part swing of the staff from Star Fox Adventure, which I've always thought deserved at least a bit of representation. Yes, Crystal could be introduced to Smash someday and make way more use of it, but I'm not reserving things or putting anything aside for potential future characters in this video. I'll hand things over to ESAM again for Pikachu.
While Pikachu isn't my namesake character, it is what I am most known for by far, and I really think that they could have gone a slightly better route with some of Pikachu's moves. You see him move his tail a lot, he uses his body as a hitbox, he uses electricity, but there's one thing he does not do, which he does do in Pokken, which is use his fists, or her fists, depending on the costume. I wish that they gave Pikachu Thunder Punch, or Electric, yeah, it's Thunder Punch. I'm not a Pokemon player, forgive me if I get the name wrong. Thunder Punch. I think it would be really nice for just one of Pikachu's tilts to be Thunder Punch, just like a forward tilt, or maybe like an up tilt where you would just like punch, or like an up smash where instead of using Iron Tail, you just run up and just like do a little punch up, kind of like a Kazuya up smash type of thing. Or just like a little, like his jab would just be like boop, you know, boop, 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 but like it's electric instead of the little headbutt he has. Granted, I think headbutt is a little bit more of an iconic move for like a rat type Pokemon, but Thunder Punch, let him punch something, that's all you gotta do.
We're making a big change for Luigi and letting him spawn Gooigi for down special, instead of the Luigi Cyclone he has now. Luigi would go into a sleepy animation while the player controlled a Gooigi instead, which falls apart instantly if it either takes a hit, deals a hit, or tries to shield. If it lands a hit, the player regains control of Luigi instantly, allowing for ping-pong combos reminiscent of something like Affy and Galu from Rushdown Revolt. The launch power of Luigi's aerial super jump punch would be reduced a bit to avoid this being too abusable, which would also solve some other issues with his design. If Luigi took a hit or tried to shield, on the other hand, there would be a slight delay before Luigi could be controlled again, and while Luigi wouldn't take any knockback from hits against Luigi, the damage would still be transferred over. These traits, when combined with a cooldown on the move, would hopefully make it powerful and interesting, but still require some thought about exactly when to pull Luigi out. For Ness, I'd take the notorious yo-yo down smash away, and instead replace it with PSI Rockin' from Earthbound. This would be a very slow, but very big and strong area of effect down smash that would nicely represent something from his home series, and be a fun parallel to Lucas's very slow and strong up smash. Captain Falcon's moveset is once again a bit of a sacred cow, and mostly made up since he spends the majority of his home series inside a car. I've seen some suggestions for him to use the pistol he carries, but even if that does work for his bounty hunter nature in F-Zero, it doesn't feel like Falcon in Smash to me, which at this point is arguably more important. Something that does feel like Captain Falcon though, his iconic "show me your moves" taunt gaining a powerful, fiery hitbox right at the tip of his fingers. For Jigglypuff, I'm bringing on PJiggles. Sure, he's a content creator with a long string of extremely influential Smash videos who I've covered on my second channel before, but more importantly, he's one of the 12 people on Earth who stuck it out with Smash 4 Jigglypuff into the Ultimate era. He's earned the right to complain.
Alright, Mock, here we go. Check out this ingenious idea of mine. Almost every special move the Pokemon characters have in Smash are moves they can learn in mainline Pokemon games, and I wanted to stay true to that when thinking of a new move to give to Jigglypuff. They sadly have a very small move pool to choose from, but in Generation 8 they can learn the physical flying type move Bounce through TMs. In Pokemon, it's a 2-turn move that makes the user bounce up really high in the air, dodging most attacks on the first turn, and then slamming back down onto the opponent the next turn. But obviously in Smash I would make it work a little differently. Here it would be an aerial based special move where when pressing the button, Jigglypuff would quickly fall down, similar to stall and fall down airs like Toon Link or Banjo. The thing that would set it apart from those types of moves, since they're usually not that good, is that you can still drift sideways while falling, and more notably, that if you hit with it, Jigglypuff would bounce off of the opponent and immediately be able to use other moves. The opponents would be sent up and away with not a lot of knockback, so that they end up in front of Jigglypuff, perfectly in range for a forward air or sour spot neutral air if you drift forwards after it. Maybe if they DI poorly, you can even get a rest out of it. It could even give Jigglypuff a lot of airspeed during the bounce, so that you can try and chain multiple bounces together. That'll be fun, and frustrating. I would personally make the falling speed of Bounce faster than their fast fall speed, since they're the slowest faller in the entire game after Peach and Daisy by a considerable margin. This would help Puff with their weakness of occasionally having a hard time landing back onto the stage. And since the move is called Bounce, I would make Jigglypuff bounce off of the stage if you land directly onto it with a little bit of lag so you can't directly attack again when landing. I think this would balance it, as it wouldn't give Puff a free landing option, since either way you would end up in the air, though not too high off the ground. I don't really know what the move would do when used on the ground. Peach's down special doesn't do anything when she's in the air, so I don't think it would be a big deal to have Bounce do nothing when on the ground, since Jigglypuff is a very aerial based fighter anyways. And as for which one of Puff's current moves to replace with this, do you even have to ask? Rollout, obviously. That move is useless, and Bounce feels like a good fit for a neutral special since it makes you go down. And I obviously wouldn't get rid of Rest, her current down special.
Peach has one solo game, Super Princess Peach, where she gets access to 4 different vibes, and while I considered bringing them all in for a stance change style move, it wasn't terribly interesting to me, and the effects seemed like they'd have to be a bit too close to Shulk's Monado arts. I do think her Rage vibe makes a lot of sense for an up smash, though. This would be a big but slow pillar of fire that Peach was invincible through, a fun nod to her home series that also matches the harsher edge she's been given in some modern Mario appearances. I still like the ribbon twirl she uses right now for up smash, though, so a faster version of it could be moved to up tilt instead. Daisy's new up special could be her Mega Strike from Mario Strikers Charged, a fast rising uppercut with an invincible crystal arm that combos into a punch at a semi-spike angle with modest knockback if the button is held. The parasol she uses right now is much more associated with Peach, and this change would make her more dangerous in a scrap, but worse off stage, which is the direction I'd like to see her moved in overall. It also brings more Mario Sports rep into Smash, which fits Daisy well and is something I'm always on board with, especially if it just so happens to be the best Mario Sports game. Bowser's new down smash would be a ground slam that we see in many Mario games, games, a quick initial jumping stomp with a lot of kill power that also sends out a slow-moving shockwave with combo potential. This wouldn't cover the entire stage or anything, but could be a cool short-range setup projectile, and for visibility's sake would be the flaming version that appears in Odyssey. Ice Climber is a very simple game that has some reasonable representation in Smash, but icicles are a prominent obstacle that's never directly addressed. This could be done with the Ice Climber's new down air, as they encase their lower halves in armored ice before plummeting to the ground. Sheik's Bouncing Fish would be moved to the side special slot, freeing up Dan special for the Bolero of Fire in the delayed eruption form it receives in Hyrule Warriors. I love the idea of Sheik's musical abilities from Ocarina of Time and some aspect of Hyrule Warriors being represented in Smash, and this does both while also paralleling Zelda, giving both of them trap-based down specials. Unlike the Phantom though, Sheik's Bolero would only have modest knockback, although it would pop opponents up and also be a multi-hit that briefly locked them in place, making it a great combo starter rather than a kill move. Zelda's final smash is no longer the Bow of Light in Ultimate, meaning that this iconic move no longer has any kind of representation in Smash and can instead be folded into her core moveset through side special. This would be slower than most uncharged bow shots in Smash and couldn't be charged at all, but it would be angleable and would bounce off surfaces, a little nod to its use with the Mirror Shield in the Wind Waker. It would also cause a brief freeze in place with only gentle knockback afterwards, alluding to its more stun-focused nature when Zelda wields it in her home series. This would allow it to combo into Phantom or Furare's Wind at a distance, and up close, it could combo into many things, including her new forward and back air, Din's Fire. This would replace the lightning kicks and work pretty similarly, albeit with a spark that erupted into a larger orb of fire if it connected, which could potentially hit other players in bigger fights. Could even make it a brief multi-hit before the launch to really give your opponent time to think about how screwed they are. This would keep all three goddess powers intact on her kit, and does admittedly lose something by not having them all in her special moves anymore, but there are only 3 of them and 4 special slots. If there were 4 goddess powers, then we'd be starting to get into really unsatisfying territory. Dr. Mario's Super Jump Punch is a solid and well-liked move, but still ultimately very replaceable considering that even Mario's variant isn't my all-time favorite series reference. His new up special would spawn a virus at Doc's feet as he raises a pill above his head, before slamming the pill into the virus, which causes an explosion that launches him upwards. This virus would rotate from red to blue to yellow, and would infuse Doc with fire, frost, or electrical damage respectively as he rose, although the altered effects on his opponent wouldn't be too dramatic. The explosion at Doc's feet would spike, but this wouldn't typically be what connected, as the act of raising the pill above his head would be a launcher that would combo into the boost Doc receives. He himself would usually be the finisher hitbox. And then just to sweeten the deal, let's have it send him a bit higher and not put him into freefall, buffs he could desperately use at the moment. Pichu's side special would be replaced with Flail, a chargeable lunge forward much like Skullbash that acted as a command grab which led into a flurry of blows. Hit grab would actually be the more accurate term since it still wouldn't beat shields, and like in Pokemon, the move would power up as Pichu took damage, providing some obvious synergy with his self-damage mechanic that still left it as a firmly negative trait overall, which I think it should be. There's a bit more room to experiment with Falco's moveset than Fox's, so I'd like to see his up special go from the Firebird to the Jetpack from Star Fox Assault. This could still have a bit of wind-up time to keep it on theme, but I picture it being decently long-ranged, not putting Falco into freefall, and letting him act out of it at any point. Hey, Falco prefers the air. At the same time though, it'd also be fast and unmaneuverable enough that he would need to commit to some degree. There is so much unexplored moveset potential within the Fire Emblem series, part of why so many people have been upset with their Smash implementation, but Marth in particular is the quintessential bare-bones fundamental sword fighter, and I think he should stay that way. His down smash can switch to the second hit of this animation from Fire Emblem New Mystery of the Emblem though, just to pack in another reference, and frankly, if every single one of these slow, double-hit sword swipes went away, I'd be fine with it. TCNick3 will be hopping in next. He's determined enough to hone his Lucina through the trials of hell, he's loud enough to get subscribers, and his greatest accomplishment of all, he's smart. Floor is all yours, man.
I've always thought to make Lucina truly busted was to give her a projectile. Her lack of one is one of her only notable flaws. In Fire Emblem Awakening, Lucina can become a bow knight, giving her the ability to use a bow and arrow, and so that's a projectile I'd give to her. It would make most sense to replace this with Neutral B, but Shield Breaker is her only cheater move, so we kinda need that. Instead, we'll replace it with Down B, an awkward place to put a projectile, but it gets rid of counter, which only gives me bad habits. The move would be a quick one that applies good pressure, aka I can spam it, and eventually kills it like 110, 120 near the ledge. Think a weaker Byleth arrow, but also a bit faster to come out. This would make Lucina more annoying, yes, but she needs some flavor, fellas. She's a bit dry right now, and so I rest my case with Bow Knight Lucina.
For young Link, reworking him into a mask user from Majora's Mask is an incredibly common request, but this is one of those instances where using a lot of masks is outside this video's scope, and just putting a single one on there feels off to me. Rather than doing this, I've opted to include the ice arrows, also from Majora's Mask. These would be added alongside his existing fire arrows and could be selected by pressing A or shield while the fire arrow was charging. They'd travel slower, freeze opponents, and could also create a short ice block when they hit the ground, only one of which could be out at a time. Stepping in for Ganondorf, I am joined by Zeltik, an absolute titan of the Zelda community. He's played Ganondorf throughout Ultimate, he's run a microscope over every single Ganon moveset throughout the entire Zelda canon, he knows more about the stuff that didn't make it into Ganon's home series than I do about the game I made a 4.5-hour video on. So, I mean, I guess he's probably qualified to talk about this.
Ganondorf is one of Nintendo's most iconic villains, a highly intelligent, manipulative evil wizard with an insatiable lust for power. So it's always felt quite disappointing that his appearance in Smash is little more than a semi-clone of Captain Falcon, despite how much fun he is to play as. Nowhere is Ganondorf's similarity to Falcon highlighted better than his neutral special, Warlock Punch, a slower, stronger version of Smash Bros' most iconic move. It's undoubtedly one of the most satisfying attacks in the game to land, but it doesn't really add anything to Ganondorf's kit. The last thing he needs is another incredibly slow, incredibly hard-hitting attack. So to steer Ganondorf away from Falcon and closer to his appearances in the Zelda series, I'd replace Warlock Punch with something more useful and more fitting, like the Dead Man's Volley. This move first appeared with Aghanim in A Link to the Past, but perhaps most famously in Ocarina of Time, used by Ganondorf himself. It's a magical projectile that deals heavy damage, but can be reflected back between the caster and target, with each bounce increasing its speed. In Smash, because he's so slow, Ganondorf struggles with being zoned out. Having a projectile option himself would help to mitigate this weakness, and give him more options to deal with opponents at mid-range. However, just like King Dedede's Gordos, the Dead Man's Volley would be able to be reflected back at Ganondorf with regular attacks. Much like how most reflected projectiles work, returning a Dead Man's Volley could increase both the speed and damage of the projectile. It could start out relatively weak, but once it bounces between Ganondorf and his opponent a few times, could become incredibly dangerous.
A pretty simple change for Mewtwo, I'd replace his generic Dark Energy forward smash with Psychic as it appears in the 3D titles, with Mewtwo holding out his hand and summoning an implosion of Psychic Energy. Come on, Mewtwo's the most famous Psychic-type Pokemon, he should have the move Psychic on his Smash kit. I considered adding it to a special move, but I like how all of those work already except for maybe Teleport, and Psychic is mostly used as a big dumb damage dealer in Pokemon, so forward smash fits. While Roy's double-edged dance is cool, I'd actually say it's cooler than Marth's, it's still a bit of an unnecessary holdover from his clone days. I'd replace it with his basic attack animation from the Game Boy, but to spruce it up and make it feel aligned with his Smash incarnation, it'd be a quick lunge forward and a burst of flames. Chrom would lose the Flare Blade, which I think looks considerably lamer than Roy's, and instead toss a Hand Axe, in the ballpark of a faster, weaker Belmont attack with a lower arc. This gives some obvious parallels to his daughter Lucina, with him making use of another long-running Fire Emblem projectile that can be wielded by the male-exclusive Dread Fighter. Mr. Game & Watch's down tilt took a bit of a hit in Ultimate, and its old version was never my favorite either, so I'd replace the manhole cover with a pinball flipper that spawns on the ground and pops opponents up into the air. This would be less of the kill move that it is right now, and more of a combo tool, which means that yes, as a matter of fact, I absolutely am giving him more chances to go for Hail Mary Judge confirms. Meta Knight was a tough one since there are several moves that he regularly employs in Kirby but not in Smash, but I'm going with a straightforward Sword Beam for neutral special that can be charged to turn it into a flurry. He can't lose Mach Tornado though, so instead that's going to be moved to down special, replacing what I consider to be the far more expendable Dimensional Cape. His Sword Plunge from throughout the Kirby games also makes a lot of sense here, but we already have plenty of moves that work this way, and they're not usually considered to be that great. I think that whether it was assigned to down special or down air, it'd mark a pretty sharp nerf compared to what he already has. Up next, I'm joined once more by TierZoo, who's best known for turning the natural world into a video game, and then that video game into tier lists, but is also a very long-time pit player. Listen, I'm on the Dark Pit train myself, but you know, it's the holidays. What better time to put our differences aside and gather around a warm arrow snipe? Blue or purple. I'm not forgiving the taste in Yu-Gi-Oh cards though. This guy plays dinosaurs. Degenerate deck for a degenerate soul.
Hey everyone. So, I've actually not played Kid Icarus Uprising, so I don't really know any good iconic things to pull from there, but what I did play was the original Kid Icarus game. Now, Pit's moveset in that game is extremely limited, but there are a few items from the game that aren't used at all in Smash Bros., such as the harp. In Kid Icarus, the harp is a rare item Pit can find which immediately converts all hostile enemies in the vicinity to healing items that Pit can pick up. Obviously, turning your opponent into an item in Smash would be pretty powerful and not very fun, but I could absolutely see it being a useful area of effect move that converts all nearby items and projectiles into food or other item-based power-ups. Maybe it could function similar to Rosalina's down special, pulling a bunch of food items towards Pit in a large radius. If I had to choose, I'd probably say that this should replace down special, which is tough to give up because it's one of his better moves.
Dark Pit gets his ubiquitous Dark Pit staff, which replaces Electroshock Arm in the side special slot. Remember, this video ignores final smashes. It would function as a weaker version of the item that exists in Smash right now, where shots are more powerful the further they go. At first glance, this seems like a sensible thing to put in the neutral special slot, but realistically, I think the Silver Bow is also just too associated with him to remove. He kind of needs to keep both. This does give him a bit of redundancy in his special moves and also requires reworking his final smash, but even with these considerations, the Dark Pit staff is just something that I really think needs to be in his core moveset. I'd retune the Silver Bow a bit alongside this to make its arrows slower and shorter ranged with increased damage and kill power, creating more defined use cases for each projectile. His new final smash could be a number of things, but let's just say that he gets the Lightning Chariot so that Pit can get the Great Sacred Treasure from Kid Icarus Uprising, which I always thought made more sense anyways. I turned Zero Suit Samus's Rocket Heal dash attack into a simple somersault. This would be a nod to the Justin Bailey cheat code from the original Metroid, where you could play as Samus outside the power suit, but she still had the ability to turn into a morph ball, or at least some fleshy eldritch approximation that I'm thankful isn't available in higher resolution. A somersault acts as a subtle allusion to this that also feels naturally aligned with her modern Smash incarnation. Wario's Dan Air can be replaced with his powerful ground pound that's shown up in many of his games. As I said with Meta Knight, there are a lot of these already, and Wario's existing Dan Air is quite good, but this concept really fits him, has shown up a lot, and I tune it to be one of the better stall and fall aerials. Snake's infamous side special is out, replaced with the Fulton device from Metal Gear. One input tosses the sticky device, and it can be activated with another, or automatically if it hits someone during the throw. Upon activation, it floats up slowly, acting as a barrier that can't be teched off of. The bottom remains sticky, and if a player gets stuck to it, they're briefly pulled into the air with it. They can act while they're stuck here, but can't control their movement, and any action that imparts momentum, whether we're talking special moves, air dodges, etc., will keep them locked in place. The balloons can be destroyed, but it'll take at least 2 aerials, and if you're hit by someone while stuck, you're launched out with reduced knockback as the device breaks apart. Oh, right, it can also catch items, including Snake's own grenade, as well as physical projectiles. The Fulton device could potentially create a lot of wacky and skill-testing interactions, and yes, this is giving him back 2 plantable trap items like he had in Brawl, obviously very powerful, but as compensation he also loses arguably the single best edgeguarding tool in the entire game. Ike gains the projectile attack his sword Ragnall grants in his Fire Emblem appearances, replacing Eruption in the neutral special slot. Eruption can instead be moved to down special, where it now gains a bit of armor on charge startup and charge release, allowing for it to still be used as a pseudo counter. If you followed me for a while, you may have seen this one coming. Heavyweight projectile sword fighter is my dream archetype, and Ike is one of my favorite video game characters. A more canonically faithful version would easily be my Smash main. I've gotta say though, that even putting all that bias aside, this feels like a really smooth and natural change to make. For Pokemon trainers, Squirtle gains Bubble as his new forward smash, an attack that's a bit weaker than the current version but fires a big stream of bubbles with a longer lasting hitbox. Ivysaur's Bullet Seed can be moved to the up smash slot, freeing up neutral special for Sludge Bomb. This would be an arcing projectile that would carry opponents with it a short ways before dissolving, potentially slamming them into the ground if it hit them on the latter half of its downward arc, and would inflict moderate poison damage over time. Ivysaur is dual typing after all, grass and poison, whereas its current moveset is entirely grass based, so it'd be cool to see both represented. As for Charizard, while Fly is an undeniably important move in the Pokemon series, I've never liked its Smash implementation all that well and can't rework it. So instead, Charizard's new up special becomes Aerial Ace. Charizard does a Claw Slash as he throws himself into the sky, and if the button is held down, he'll do a second Claw Slash that launches opponents upwards, which the first slash combos into and does not put him into freefall. If it's not held down though, he instead reaches the apex of his launch, and then shifts into the glide he could perform in Brawl. Listen, I know Meta Knight sort of ruined things for everyone there, but Charizard's glide was honestly totally fine, and one of his designated roles in Pokemon Trainer is the Recovery Specialist. I'm intentionally pushing the power of up special here. For the sake of insurance though, I would also put a time limit on it like we see with Steve's up special to avoid some of Brawl's more abusable elements. Diddy Kong's neutral air would be replaced with his tailspin from Donkey Kong 64, complete with the air stalling property. I like the cartwheel he currently uses just fine. Cartwheeling is a signature move for him, but it's also represented in his dash attack, which does tend to be the more common way you see it get used in the Donkey Kong games. This new one would offer something a bit more unique, and extra air mobility options, even relatively subtle ones, are always nice to have. While we're on air mobility, I also considered doing something to emphasize his rocket barrels more, which as time goes on have become a bigger and bigger part of his identity in Donkey Kong, but to make that go smoothly in Smash, I think you'd ideally get a bit more of a substantial rework. Lucas uses PSI Magnet for his down special, but Ness already beat him to the punch there, so we'll swap it out with PSI Counter. This would be somewhat in the same ballpark, but rather than absorbing energy projectiles, Lucas would now have a lingering counter and reflector with very high multipliers. The trade-off would be that, like in Mother 3, he would still take partial damage from any attack he countered or reflected. There's a lot to potentially do with Sonic, especially with the recent release of Sonic Frontiers, which contains a lot of interesting new moves. Psyloop could possibly do some cool things on a fast positioning-based character, for example, maybe as a new down special. There's Werehog stuff, sword stuff, projectile stuff, and all of that's great, but first things first, can we please just give him the Sonic Eagle already? This is a cool, distinct move that would fit a forward air roll perfectly, and the fact that it still hasn't shown up in an official Smash game somehow just feels weird at this point. Especially when you consider that Sonic's fighting game appearances were used as inspiration for his moveset. Now, I really don't think he needs both Spin Dash and Spin Charge, and replacing one of them could potentially do a lot to make his playstyle healthier, way more than a new forward air, I admit that. But the Sonic Eagle is just screaming way too loud at me. King Dedede's Gordos can be moved to down special, clearing up side special for the hammer spin we see throughout several Kirby games. He'd spin up to 3 times as long as the special button was held down, and if it was still held after the last spin, he'd do a hammer toss. The spinning hits wouldn't link directly into each other, but the trajectories would be set up so that the final hit of the spin could potentially combo into the toss. Olimar's going to be taken over by Dabuz, one of the best players on the entire planet, in addition to being a prominent content creator. As a matter of fact, Olimar isn't even the only character he's a top representative for. I just asked him to pick whichever one gave him the strongest idea.
How do you add more mechanics from Olimar's games into his kit? And I don't want to take anything away, because his kit feels very, not just complete, but you need all parts of his kit. He has a hold mechanic with up B, where if you hold it, you go faster, higher. If you let go, you go lower, slower. I'm like, what if you gave other special moves hold mechanics? First thing, he needs 4 Pikmin. Okay, it's gonna make sense. It might sound broken. A lot of these things are gonna sound broken, but it's fun. If you hold neutral B, you get 2 new Pikmin, and they have a set order. And it's gonna take about a second of holding neutral B for this, so it's very slow pluck. And the first one is gonna be Bulbor Pikmin from, I think it's Pikmin 2 in the caves. Just making like a normal Pikmin strength, I'd say. Ranges are the same, whatever. And Bulborbs in the game, they grab enemies, right? Eat the Pikmin. So why not make a Bulbor Pikmin essentially a command grab type of thing, where if you throw the side B, it actually grabs the shield. Maybe it throws towards Olimar or in the air or something, right? And get some combos off the Bulbor Pikmin side B. Probably make it a little bit slower, make the arc shorter, whatever it is. The point is, you throw at someone and whoosh, you gotta grab on them. You could even do something like maybe the smashes also now grabs. In that case, you definitely have to nerf the range or something. Imagine up smashing someone, they just freaking grab them, and they can combo off some sort of throw off this, they yeet it towards Olimar, and you're like, alright, now I'm gonna combo to my other up smash into an up air or something. Or maybe you can combo to another one of these, you have 2 of them, and you just start looping the throws. I think that's pretty broken and badass. Hold the Pikmin for the neutral B of the pluck again, you get a rock Pikmin from the games. Now, the rock Pikmin in the games, what they do is they basically break armor. So you throw out some, I think it's a worm boss, for example. You throw the worm boss, and actually breaks his crystal shell. Shield break. Duh. So make it kind of like a pro Pikmin. Give it less range on side B, less range on the smashes, but all the rock Pikmin attacks, they do insane shield damage. You block a rock Pikmin side B, that shield is halfway gone. You block a rock Pikmin forward smash, that's like a pebble. That's like blocking a Lucina shield breaker that's uncharged. Is that broken? Yeah. Is it funny? Yeah. Olimar's a slow character anyway, it's totally fine. Trust me on this. Second thing I was thinking, side B. What if you could hold it and aim it a little bit, right? If you hold the side B, you can aim it upwards for higher arc. You can aim it lower, snipe someone off stage, but doing aim side B, angle it downwards, and hit them with that. The more you hold it, the more distance it gets to a certain extent. And you might be able to do things like throw a Pikmin up, and then throw another Pikmin really far forward, and you have this kind of cannon coming down while another Pikmin is launching at the opponent. It would definitely play into the fact that in the Pikmin games, you are holding and aiming the side B. Maybe even just make it so you can move while holding the side B. Although that might be a little bit too much, but be very it makes sense with the games. And then the final thing, so Olimar has a whistle. You can actually use the whistle to move Pikmin around Olimar. So you can kind of like, if someone's on the ground, you could just basically have your entire army of Pikmin swarm an enemy. So my idea is if you hold the whistle, instead of getting a whistle out that like recalls Pikmin, the whistle lets you control the Pikmin and basically move the Pikmin forward and make it some sort of swarm attack. Maybe it grabs them. Maybe it does a lot of knockback. Maybe it's just a lingering hitbox. You get to move it back and forth with him. Well, I'm not really sure what like the purpose this race serves. I think it'd be fun. I think maybe for like lead trapping especially, it lets you effectively throw out a hitbox. Maybe you can like swarm the Pikmin. When you swarm the Pikmin, you can't use them for a little bit, so you're stuck with Olimar's like tilts, jab, dash attack, and it can be kind of like a pyro side B type of thing where you lose your basically move kit when you use the swarm mechanic. So yeah, I think that'd be pretty fun. Well, this is cool ideas for your video, bro. Catch you later.
Lucario's jab has a cool animation, but it's also a terrible move and does nothing interesting. Let's replace it with the power-up punch. A single-hit jab that's not exceptionally strong, maybe enough to kill at very high aura levels, but every time it connects, it gives Lucario a slight aura boost, maybe the equivalent of 5% damage or so. This would be clearly indicated with a blue spark on the jab itself, and on hit, Lucario's aura would significantly flare up for a moment before settling back down. This explores new territory for jabs and the aura mechanic, and also incentivizes a bit more of an in-your-face playstyle, appropriate for a fighting-type Pokemon. Rob received pretty limited games during his era, but what he did get can be referenced a bit further. I'd replace his up smash with the Rising Pillars from Gyromite, as Rob spawns a button on either side of him, one red and one blue, and punches them, each one causing a pillar to quickly rise out of the ground. This wouldn't be quite as lethal as his current up smash, but would have wider coverage. PK Beats will be taking over for ToonLink, who's not only a prominent Smash content creator, but also a great composer, including for songs directly inspired by ToonLink's adventures, one of which you're listening to right now.
For any of the links, they've always got a ton of items in their kits that have just been limited to the same handful over and over. So obviously I wanted to introduce something unique from the Wind Waker for ToonLink. And the most interesting one of the bunch is pretty simply the Skull Hammer. I think you should replace this boomerang and take the side special slot. You could have the standing variant when you just press side B, which could be slower but stronger, and a jumping version when you input it while moving, giving it more reach and mobility at the cost of power. And the aerial version would probably work the same way. This would be one of his strongest moves, with reasonable shield damage and potentially even spike opponents that are off stage. This would provide ToonLink with a really good high knockback option to combat his struggle to take stocks, but its slow speed would still require good planning and use of his bombs to create openings as usual. And since it replaces his boomerang, it limits the amount of projectile oppression he can create, which I think could encourage some more dynamic hands-on gameplay.
We have 2 laser guns already in the Star Fox cast, and while Wolf's is cool and fits his jack-of-all-trades nature, I'd still prefer to swap it out with his double machine guns from Star Fox Assault's victory animations. These would have more startup time than they currently do, but once fired, opponents would be caught in the spray and popped gently upwards at the end, allowing Wolf to combo it into an aerial, or, if spaced just right, even his Wolf Flash. This would obviously make for a much more powerful projectile than he currently has, but would also come with a lot more risk. Would it be better than his existing blaster? I'm leaning towards no, but definitely more distinct and interesting. Villager and Isabelle both share essentially the same dash attack, and even though he got there first, I'm still choosing to replace his, specifically with a pole vault across the ground from Animal Crossing New Horizons, albeit with a lower launch angle. While not especially strong, it would be a quick move that covered a lot of ground and could be used to launch him off stage, opening up new edgeguard and neutral options that put Villager himself front and center, rather than giving him more projectiles. Mega Man is one of the characters that really feels plucked out of his home series with a lot of attention to detail, but that attention is mostly focused on his older appearances. I'd like to bring in a modern weapon, and the bounce ball for Mega Man 11 seems like a fun addition. It would be slower, but it could also be heavily angled and would bounce off all surfaces, including the undersides of thin platforms, and could be charged in place by holding side special down to release from 1 to 3 balls in a fan. With the Crash Bomber slot taken, it could instead be moved to down special and unseat the Leaf Shield. Never a favorite of mine thanks to being kind of annoying and having some weird functionality. Returning to the channel for Wii Fit Trainer, we've got A-Star III, a longtime content creator who's also been consistently crushing his region with a character for years now. And by years, I mean he's been doing this since Smash 4, the days where deep breathing was still an honest move. Truly a character specialist among character specialists.
Hey everyone, it's A-Star III, and I'm back again to tell you which move that I would replace on Wii Fit Trainer, okay? Because love the character, been using them ever since the game came out. Fantastic. Let me tell you about Sun Salutation, right? Very iconic move, heals you for 2%, has a cool little win box on it. I got buffed recently. It's an okay move, it's not too bad, but let me compare it to another Charge Shot move. Charge Shot. Charge Shot from Samus can be, at minimum, -16 on shield, or when you have it almost a full charge, +4 positive on shield. That makes this move very good for ledge trapping, for pressuring shield, and it's only got a 31 frame window to come out when it's not fully charged. Compare that to Wii Fits, that takes 39 whole frames to come out, and at minimum can only be -26 to -16 on shield. Most of the time, I'm kind of just like, I might as well just charge it so I can get a free 2% anyway. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna replace Wii Fit's charge shot with a sort of Monado-like mechanic from Shulk with a move that can choose between various sports equipment from her various minigames, because let me tell you, Wii Fit has got a ton of games that you can choose from. I thought she could replace that move with a tennis racket type move where she does a smash, overhead smash of a tennis ball, so she could send out another ball similar to how header works. She could do a golf swing because there's a mini golf game where she can swing a golf ball. This can cover low, so you could use it to cover ledge potentially, or you could use it to have a better upwards angle. The last thing we could do is replace it with hula hoops. Similar to how Super Hoop worked in Smash 4, you could have a hitbox, a spinning hitbox of hula hoops charge around Wii Fit, and then you could unleash all of the hula hoops in a sideways projectile that hits multiple times. You could use it at ledge to counter ledge get up or ledge roll because it's a very active hitbox. It gives Wii Fit a move that has relevant hitboxes, somewhat like Lucario's charge shot, so that people can't feel free to pressure her as much. And it gives Wii Fit an option when people are behind her. This would give Wii Fit some more diagonal range that would make Wii Fit ledge trapping better. Plus, it's all changed by deep breathing too. I think she could tap B rhythmically like how she could in Super Hoop to charge it up. I think that would be wonderful for her, because I'm not gonna say that Wii Fit's bad or anything, but let me tell you, ledge trapping, I can't just be throwing balls and hope that they hit people. That's what I would change on Wii Fit. I hope they do in the next game, because that would be fantastic. Thanks, y'all.
Rosalina gets something a little bit different and gains the floating power she's shown to have in Super Mario Galaxy. Rather than making this a special move, it's done by holding down the jump button, reminiscent of Peach and Daisy. Unlike them though, it has to be done at the apex of the jump or after her jumps are exhausted, and allows for some slow omnidirectional drift rather than rapidly moving side to side, comparable to a weaker version of Project Plus's take on Mewtwo. It's intended to be used purely as a movement tool and not to be incredibly versatile, but movement options of any kind are always very powerful, and Rosalina is such a floaty character both in canon and her Smash feel that I think giving her a proper floating power is extremely appropriate. Gaining something similar to Peach also feels appropriate given that they're both magical princesses from the Mario universe. The rising uppercut that Little Mac uses for an up special isn't too far removed from his punch-out moveset, but I'd go all the way and replace it with a Star Punch. The base version of this behaves pretty similarly, although he doesn't start spinning yet, and it comes with a new star meter that gains a star every 5 times he lands a hit, or every time he lands a counter hit, whether we're talking using armor or landing his slip counter. Slip counter's startup would also be moved from frame 5 to frame 3 to place more emphasis on it, which would both be helpful in Smash and tie his playstyle into Punch-Out more. He could then expend these stars by holding the special button down when using Star Punch. For every star consumed, the Star Punch would lift Mac higher into the air and deal more damage and knockback, helping both with kill confirms and recovery duties. By the time it hit 3 stars, it would go a very respectable distance, be quite strong, and gain its corkscrew property back, slightly improving its hitbox. Getting grabbed or taking excessive damage would cost Mac a star. This would replace the KO punch that Little Mac currently uses, with something that's not as strong, but has a lot more utility and can be used more frequently, curbing some of the polarization of his current design that I don't think is especially healthy. Peanut, the world's top Little Mac player, brought the idea of the Star Punch up back when I interviewed him for my comeback mechanics video, so credit where it's due, although this is my take on the concept. I love Hydro Pump the Pokemon move, but I'm not a huge fan of how it's used for Greninja's up special, especially when we already see a more true-to-form version appear in Pokemon Trainer's Final Smash, so I'm gonna replace it here with Night Slash. Greninja disappears in a puff of smoke which hangs in the air for a brief moment. A blurry shadow then launches from the smoke at very high speeds, with Greninja reappearing at the end of the rush to deliver a powerful X-shaped slash that launches opponents downwards. This launch couldn't be teched on the ground, similar to Byleth's up special, but it otherwise wouldn't be an especially powerful spike, and if the attack connected, Greninja wouldn't be sent into freefall. The rush wouldn't go extremely far, but it would be omnidirectional, and could be cancelled into the final attack early by tapping the special button, although with its high speed, this would take very precise timing. This change would give Greninja a new up special which enables more combos and fits him thematically, but wouldn't shore up his slow out of shield options which have become one of his defining weaknesses. Coming in hot with Guy Fieri at his side, next up we have Waidu. On top of his Mii Brawler skills, he's also a content creator, a TO responsible for the most evil tournament concept of all time, and someone I've been mistaken for on multiple occasions because of our logos. I swear, they're not that similar. Get glasses.
So, if I could change a move on Mii Brawler, I would go back and fix the one tragic thing that crushed my dreams and turned me from an optimistic Guy Fieri main into a tryhard DLC player. You see, in Smash 4, Brawler Forward Air had this really awesome pop-up hitbox that sent people upwards with a ton of combo potential. But then in Ultimate, they totally removed that feature from his fair, which made the move absolutely terrible. And at first I was sad about that, but also I kinda gave the devs the benefit of the doubt here. Like, well, maybe they just didn't understand how good a pop-up hitbox could be. Yeah, so then they gave it to Joker. As in, he gets to have sick combos with the exact thing they took from Brawler. The dev team basically said this move is too good not to cost extra. And, you know, I understand they have to make money and everything, but please give me my fare back. Sakurai, please give it back. You know what? I'll buy it. Make it DLC. Make it exclusive to the Candy Crush costume. I don't care. I just want my fare back.
Mii Sword Fighter is the least pure and thematically appropriate of the Miis, given that his moveset seems to be more based on Link than anyone else, which is a weird choice that extends to his multi-hit forward air. I'd replace it with a sword arc akin to Marth's, basically the quintessential sword move in Smash, which actually feels like a pretty bizarre omission right now. Mii Gunner is back to much more pure territory. She's about as zonery as zoners come. And one principle that appears with zoners over and over again is the universal triangle of shoot a projectile, jump over the projectile, anti-air the jump. Her up tilt is very well suited for this, but while her up smash theoretically should be as well, it's based on Samus's, a notoriously inconsistent move and not necessarily one I think needs a carbon copy. I'd replace it with a slow but powerful upwards punch with the arm cannon that creates a single stronger explosion, giving her the choice between a quick, non-committal anti-air and a much harder callout with additional reward. While Palutena's Warp Up special is an ability that appears in Kid Icarus Uprising's multiplayer, and her Smash moveset is largely based around that mode, it's a bit of a shame that the dedicated moveset she gets isn't fully represented, and Warp is a total rehash of a move that already existed. I'd replace it with the close quarters attack that she uses in Kid Icarus, a note of shield move that would also launch her into the air. This wouldn't go as far or be as controllable as Warp, but it also wouldn't put her into free fall, would still have decent travel distance, and would be at least somewhat angleable. Pac-Man does have some fun references in his kit, but the ghosts, one of the most iconic aspects of his home series, aren't used in an especially interesting way. His fire hydrant that he uses for down special is getting the boot, and instead his new down special would be Ghost House. This would spawn a single ghost each time in a set order of Blinky, Pinky, Inky, and Clyde, which, if you didn't know, each behave differently in Pac-Man, and their behavior would be somewhat replicated here. Blinky would simply home in on the closest target. Pinky would continuously try to home in on where the target was moving towards. Inky would try to keep the target between itself and Pac-Man, and its launch trajectory would always head back towards Pac-Man, great for starting rebound combos. And then Clyde would first home in on a target, and then start moving around erratically when he got close. Their speeds, damage, etc. would be tuned differently to compensate for the different usefulness of their behavior, but none of them would be especially strong projectiles, and they could be attacked en route. They would also alter the trajectory of Pac-Man's bonus fruit if they collided with them, maintaining some of the Galaxy Brain setup aspect of the fire hydrant while keeping a lot more of Pac-Man's canonical feel. Because the ghosts would now be represented in Pac-Man's moveset elsewhere, his smash attacks could instead use the various sprites that currently appear in his up taunt. Like the taunt, these would cycle through randomly, which would just be cosmetic. His new up taunt could be this juggling animation from Pac-Man World 2, maybe with a power pellet instead of the logo. Robin uses the Levin Sword, a long-standing Fire Emblem weapon, and yet never makes use of its ability to attack from a distance, one of its defining traits in its home series. This is likely because he already has ranged thunder moves, but it still strikes me as a little weird. I'd replace his up smash with a more committal thrust into the sky. It would still work as a solid traditional up smash, using some electricity to expand its hitbox outwards a bit, but would also crash a bolt of lightning into the ground a fixed distance in front of him. Picture a single bolt from Sora, but stronger and closer to the size of Pikachu's. Shulk's Vision from Xenoblade, which he currently uses as a down special counter, would be moved to down smash, where it would be a double-sided slash that first briefly phases Shulk into the background. His new down special would be Monado Purge, a moderate blast of energy that, if connected, temporarily coats the opponent in an aura that disables all buffs. This would include the effects of Rage, but also things like Hero's stat boosts or Cloud's Limit. The effect would only last a couple of seconds though, and the buffs would return when it wore off, so while it would kill a bit of time on something like Cloud's Limit window, connecting it wouldn't suddenly just reset the meter. One of Bowser Jr.'s most iconic appearances is in Super Mario sunshine using his paintbrush, and I'd like to see that represented outside of just a final smash. I thought of a few ways to potentially make this a special move, but it also needs to be compatible with the Koopalings, who don't have the same association. They do have wands though, so I think a simple forward smash replacement where charging it fires a projectile is the way to go here. For Bowser Jr., this could look essentially the exact same as it does in the game Bowser Jr.'s Journey. I do love the brutal drill grind though, so I'd actually move this to his forward air, turning it into more of a combo tool while keeping the wrecking ball intact for a killer back air. Duck Hunt's up special, the duck jump, is sensible but pretty bland, so I'd make it the gumshoe jump instead. Gumshoe was another light zapper game where you make the protagonist jump by shooting him, so a similar action would happen here. Pressing up special would cause the duck to do a single quick, panicked flap upwards to avoid a shot aimed at where they just were, which wouldn't cause freefall and could be repeated up to 3 times per airtime. The shot would never connect with Duck Hunt themselves, but would be a reasonably powerful attack if an opponent got caught in the crossfire. At time of upload, Street Fighter 6 isn't too far away, but I'm ignoring unreleased games, so instead Ryu's gonna get a Street Fighter 5 edition like I was originally hoping for in Ultimate. I've gone with a simplified version of the Danjin Ranki, one of Ryu's V-trigger options from that game. He now has a meter that fills a bit when he takes damage, and much more whenever he parries a move or absorbs it with focus attack. Once built, he can spend it with a motion input using the special button to throw out an electrified version of either the Hadoken or Shoryuken. Both of these deal increased electrical damage, and the Hadoken causes extra hit stun, shield damage, and comes out and travels faster. The Shoryuken, meanwhile, comes out faster with earlier invincibility, is stronger, and deals a huge amount of shield pushback. This is more of a rough approximation of the V-trigger system as it works in its home series, but I think it fits into Smash pretty well and finally gives Ryu a meter of some kind. Considering that meter management is a key facet of most 2D fighting games and Ryu is the poster child for the genre, it's kind of strange that he doesn't have this already. And I have to imagine that if he wasn't the first fighting game character introduced to Smash, he probably would. Ken would gain Heat Rush in the same manner as Ryu, and yes, the whole focus/parry meter gain thing is meant to simulate Ryu's mechanics in Street Fighter 5, but I think it's more interesting if Ken gets it too. When expending his meter, Hadoken becomes the Shakunetsu, which Ryu has in his default moveset, and Ken also slides forward while throwing it. Shoryuken gains more horizontal momentum and deals extra damage and kill power, and Ken also gets to empower his Tatsumaki, which lights him on fire and travels further, now dealing enough damage and hit stun to make it a reliable combo tool. Ken probably gets the better moveset upgrade here, but like in Street Fighter 5, his meter would also take longer to charge. We can bring a bit of Cloud's Final Fantasy VII Remake moveset into Smash with a focused thrust, replacing his dash attack. This will go much further than his current dash attack and be a bit stronger too, at the cost of some vertical coverage and a slight bit of wind-up at the start. I actually think that it could also be an interesting replacement for his forward smash, a unique attack which would still have the mix of both speed and power that director Masahiro Sakurai wanted to convey with the move, but at the end of the day, dash attack just makes so much sense. I'd take Corrin's existing up smash, a stab in the dragon form, and change it to the overhead swipe animation from one of their critical hits in Fire Emblem Fates. This technically makes it a bit more generic in some senses because it's no longer using Corrin's most unique trait, but functionally the existing one is already kind of a chic ripoff, and this new one would work in a more interesting way and be a lot better. As a side note, these critical hits are actually full of a lot of cool attacks that seem really well suited for Smash, and I wish they'd gotten a bit more focused, especially given how underwhelming Corrin's ground game can be right now. Bayonetta is another character that feels pulled right out of her home series, but I would replace her underwhelming dash attack with the Demon Pulse, which would do a lot more for her and bring some Bayonetta 3 rep into Smash. This is just one of several transformations that she's been able to do in canon, which does potentially run into the lack of purity feeling I addressed in the video's intro, but it's a move she gets access to early in Bayonetta 3 and is based on Gamora, one of her most iconic summons, so I don't think it feels too hodgepodge or out of place. Inkling's Splat Roller, currently the side special, can instead be moved to dash attack, where it no longer buries opponents but can still ink the stage and have its travel distance extended by holding down the attack button. This frees up side special for the Reef Slider from Splatoon 3, which would work pretty much exactly the same as it does there. An exploding inflatable dolphin, what's not to love? For Ridley, of course we're ditching one of the single worst down airs in the entire game for his iconic tail pogo. The fact that this doesn't already exist in Smash is kind of baffling, and I picture Ridley being able to land or bounce back into the air if the attack button is held, or automatically bouncing off opponents and shields, setting up for a combo if it connects with someone. Simon uses many of the original Castlevania sub-weapons, but there are a couple missing. The dagger would probably be a bit of a redundant zoning tool in Smash, smash, but the stopwatch would be nice to see, and I'm gonna add it to his up throw. Simon hurls his opponent into the air and briefly freezes them in place with the stopwatch while he delivers several rapid whip strikes, ending with a final launching strike which kills at higher percents. The animation would be slightly more intricate than the majority of throws, but still keep up a snappy pace. Richter has a broader selection of sub-weapons to pull from than Simon, and the holy water that he currently uses is A, often cited as one of the Belmont's more obnoxious moves to play against, and B is the version that Simon uses rather than traveling across the ground like in Symphony of the Night. I'd swap it out for the item crash variant of the Holy Book, which would plant a delayed beam projectile in the air. It wouldn't be especially powerful and wouldn't go as far as it does in Castlevania, but would still be a solid asset to make up for losing such a strong ledge trapping tool, and having a beam to back him up may encourage Richter to play a bit more of a melee pressure game than Simon. Anything to separate their playstyles is welcome at this point. Actually, no, I should say almost anything. See, I also thought about doing something to Richter's dash attack, because then I'd have an excuse to move the blade dash over to side special, which would let him zip through the air like he can in Castlevania. I'd love to see that, but I think making these changes in isolation would put him way above Simon. Like with many bosses, King K. Rool has a lot of fun moves from throughout his home series, but using your blunderbuss barrel as a rocket? That's hard to top. I'd make this rush forward from Donkey Kong Country 2 his new dash attack, move his gut check dash attack that I like a lot over to forward smash, and move some variant of the boxing glove, which comes from Donkey Kong 64, over to forward tilt. Okay, hear me out here because I'm admittedly really hesitant on this one, but I want Isabelle's forward smash to be the Crucible Sword from Doom. Isabelle and Doomslayer teaming up was a colossal fan thing that was officially acknowledged later on. Yes, even taking that into account, it's still probably a bit too wacky and internety and fanfiction-y, I fully admit that, but I do kind of think it's just bordering on the edge of too far for Smash, and it would be absolutely amazing. Incineroar's down taunt becomes Intimidate, the powerful Pokemon ability that cuts opponents' attack strength. This new down taunt would be slower, and upon completion would send out a faint fiery shockwave. Any opponents hit by that who are also facing Incineroar would receive a modest debuff to the damage they dealt for the next 10 seconds, although moves under a certain knockback threshold would still deal the exact same knockback, ensuring that the debuff didn't enable any new combos by accident. While still a bit situational to set up, you could set it up in ledge scenarios, for example, and I intend this to be the first genuinely useful attacking taunt in the series, much different than the typical gimmicky joke moves we've seen before. If there's any one character this concept fits onto, it's definitely Incineroar. Piranha Plant's side special becomes a slow-moving, small, aimable fireball, an attack I associate pretty heavily with this enemy type in Mario, but one that Smash only lightly alludes to. The Poison Cloud definitely has its merits though, so it could be reworked into an unusual forward smash, and then its spiny forward smash could be moved to a double-sided hit for its down smash. Arsene is going to remain Joker's only persona as mentioned in the intro, so we're going to bring in its Dream Needle attack for down smash. Joker summons a few needles made of energy behind his back that shoot diagonally into the ground in front of him. On contact, they cause an opponent to crumple into the ground, and under normal circumstances, Joker could just barely act first, essentially an attack version of Snake's down throw. Aerial opponents would be launched with moderate knockback instead. When empowered by Arsene, the opponent's crumple animation would take longer, allowing Joker to reliably confirm out of it, and it would also launch an aerial opponent significantly further. The spell system in Dragon Quest is represented plenty in Smash, but weapon variety takes a backseat. I'd add the Unbridled Blade to his forward smash, where if the attack is charged up, the sword in his hand is swapped out for a great sword in a flash of light, which sends a shockwave forward when it slams into the earth. Giving this the critical hit chance that forward smash currently has would be a bit unreasonable, so this trait would be removed, and because it would be strange for his strongest smash attack to be the only one without it, his up and down smash would lose them as well. His up smash could gain the scooping grounded hitboxes that it currently lacks as compensation, and his down smash could be sped up by making it a twin sword attack that hits both sides simultaneously. I know the critical hits are a unique aspect of Hero that represent his home series, but I've never been a fan of how they work here, and there were already plenty of Smash characters who came from series with critical hit mechanics. A conscious decision was made up until now not to try and directly import them outside of a dedicated Final Smash, which I think was the correct decision. Banjo-Kazooie are understandably based almost entirely around their first two appearances, but I don't think it's unreasonable to have a little bit of nuts and bolts in there to better represent their full history. I would just make the wand from that game their tether grab, a sensible nod that isn't too obtrusive and feels suited for their playstyle. The moveset that Terry uses in Smash is overall very faithful to his home games, but one notable omission is the back knuckle, often an important move for him. This could be added to his moveset as a back tilt in the same way that Kazuya gets the Flash Tornado. It would have less range than his forward tilt and would lack the limb intangibility, but would also be quicker and lead into combos for longer. I'm stretching the rules slightly for Byleth's down special Amir, because it would still keep the same name and use the titular axe, as that scheme is pretty firmly established across Byleth's entire design. Rather than being the Warlock Punch-esque joke move that it is now though, the attack is now based on the exclusive Raging Storm combat art that Amir can access in Fire Emblem Three Houses. There would still be a good amount of wind-up, but much less, and Amir is now a powerful armored command grab where, on contact, Byleth scoops their opponent up and can fling them one of 4 directions. Up, forward, and backward will all work as kill throws, whereas down spikes, which kills off stage and also allows for combos up to moderate percents. This reflects the Raging Storm's canonical ability to let the user act again if it connects, and while its wind-up and high whiff lag would still make it a move that couldn't just be thrown out carelessly, it would now be a genuinely scary attack to watch out for instead of just something you use after a shield break or to style on people. Min Min's neutral air becomes her horizontal spinning kick, one of a few that she can perform in ARMS while airborne. This would be able to reflect projectiles, in the same way that its grounded version in ARMS inspired the reflector property of her up smash, would be an excellent combo starter that could eventually kill confirm into her forward smashes, and would even impart a bit of momentum forwards or backwards depending on whether the input was done with attack or special, as these are no longer needed to control individual arms. These would obviously all be great traits, but they'd kind of have to be because she's still giving up a lot by sacrificing the old arm swing, an absolutely vital part of her current toolkit. I think making her commit a bit more to ground or aerial coverage is likely a healthier design direction overall though, and with how small character-specific ARMS movesets are, there's no real reason they can't be fully represented in Smash. Steve's minecart is getting the boot, a move that I think was certainly sensible to bring into Super Smash Bros., but whether we're approaching it from a balance perspective or a canonical perspective, its implementation leaves a lot to be desired in my eyes. In Smash, it's an absolutely vital part of his toolkit that simply does too many things for not nearly enough risk or cost. Whereas in Minecraft, it's a useful but relatively innocuous item, and none of its more interesting functionality, like being usable in automated systems, really comes into Smash at all. Side special is now the Ender Pearl, an aimable projectile that teleports Steve to wherever it lands, or breaking a bit from its Minecraft functionality, can teleport Steve early with another input. This doesn't put him into free fall, but each pearl self-inflicts 5% damage and also consumes an emerald, an item that now can be mined out of the ground and is also now consumed to place TNT. Emeralds in Minecraft can be traded for various resources, including gunpowder, and while this doesn't currently apply to Ender Pearls, it's honestly not that big of a leap. These changes now leave certain resources, particularly gold, without much of a role to play, so I'd also add the ability to craft armor while in front of a crafting table. This armor would provide varying degrees of damage reduction without compensating for knockback, and Steve could have up to 3 individual pieces equipped, one each for chest, legs, and head. Damage reduction would vary by material, and so would durability, as like in Minecraft, these would break over time. Armor would have a fixed equip order of chest, legs, head for simplicity, but unlike with weapons, the material used to craft the armor would be controllable. Using down special in front of a crafting table would consume iron, side special gold, and up special diamond. Sephiroth gains a new ability in One Wing form inspired by his boss fight in Kingdom Hearts 2. Whenever he air dodges, spot dodges, or rolls with the wing out, his old animations are replaced with a teleport, and a group of small orbs then converge around the position he dodged from before crashing together into a mild explosion. While they're still floating in place, they can be destroyed with attacks, and the power of the explosion scales with how many orbs are still left to collide. Instead of an attack, Pyra gains the Purifying Flames battle skill from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. This skill in Xenoblade gives her a chance to instantly down enemies when their health is low, so in Smash, it would power up all of her attacks that are intended as kill moves if she lands them on an opponent who's taken over 100% damage. This plays into her role as the stock taker among the duo, and her sword would gain a flaming effect whenever her opponent was at the damage threshold in a one-on-one fight, or if she was in close proximity to someone who was in a group battle. As for Mithra, she's gonna get a more typical change and swap her arcing forward smash out for this stabbing attack from Xenoblade. The current one feels much better suited for Pyra, and even got a spotlight in their reveal trailer, and this new one would be even faster and safer, with a bit more range, but also weaker, now being definitively the weakest forward smash in the game. Kazuya's kit is already absolutely stuffed in Ultimate, but always room for more. He can have the Kumo Kiri from Tekken. This lets him play a bit more with ground space, something I want him doing as much as possible because it's a very defining feature of Tekken that's not explored nearly as much in Ultimate, and rather than making it a traditional input, this would be done by cancelling the first third or so of his back roll. To make things look smoother, the roll animation would be changed to resemble a Korean backdash, a famous technique in the Tekken series that I think would fit better regardless. And winding things down with Sora, I'm joined once again by Mr. Danish Buttercookie, consistently responsible for some of the slickest montages on YouTube with a ridiculous amount of the Ultimate roster, but nowadays is fully dedicated to the Disney vibe. Fully dedicated.
Thank you for having me back, Mr. MockRock. It's always a pleasure. The question actually took me a while to answer, because while I can go on for a while about how I wish we had Kingdom Hearts 2 Sora, or a less floaty and more grounded Sora, we all know that's not going to happen. The current Sora is based off of Kingdom Hearts 1 Sora, so he has most of the kit that comes from the first game, but there was one move in particular that I wish they added along with Sonic Blade, and that is Strike Raid. It would have been actually really cool to see Sora throw his Keyblade kind of like Pyra does. I think it would have fit really well as in his current kit, you know, it wouldn't ruin the balance too much. Honestly, all of his limits would have been dope, but if I had to choose one specific one, it would be Strike Raid. Thanks once again, MockRock, for having me, and good luck with the video.
Thanks, Danish, and thanks to everyone who joined me for the final MockRock video of 2022. I'm so appreciative of your contributions, and this project is something I'm very proud of. I've got everyone's info linked in the description and pinned comment, so please be sure to show them some love. Also, thanks to all of you watching for your support this year. Reminder that if you'd like to see my takes on the guest slots, those are up on MockRock Talk now. You can see that video here. Or if more MockRock stuff is your style, check out my recent Screw Attack video here. Patreon as well while I'm plugging stuff. Later, people.